one in Canada.
The honourable member for London Fanshawe.
Mr. Speaker, back in September, I asked the Minister of Veterans Affairs about the report from the National Defence and Canadian Forces Ombudsman, who called for significant changes to the process of transition for medically releasing members of the armed forces. Many medically released veterans are falling through the cracks as they transition out of the military. Because of its complexity, paperwork is not completed, veterans may be unaware of services available, new approvals need to be sought, new doctors need to be found, and new medical assessments need to be done. Mistakes on paperwork end with rejection. No indications of how or what went wrong, just a letter in the mail. Contact with case managers continues to be challenging. A 1-800 number is very frustrating for veterans just trying to get answers. On top of all this, the Liberal government made promises, clear promises to veterans in the last election. And now a year later, these promises are being delayed, ignored, or even broken. Promises such as reestablishing lifelong pensions, hiring 400 new service delivery staff, doubling the increase already committed to by Conservatives. 2 new centres of excellence in veterans care, providing greater education, counselling, and training for families, increasing the veteran survivors' pension amount from 50% to 70%, eliminating the marriage after 60 clawback clause, and promises like doubling the funding to the last post fund. We are a quarter of the way through the government's mandate, and the minister has let veterans down. To add insult to injury, the government is taking veterans back to court and arguing that the government does not owe veterans a sacred obligation. If the government is not interested in fulfilling the commitments made to veterans only a year ago, perhaps it will be willing to at least listen to the Ombudsman, who is speaking for fixes for veterans that will improve the lives of medically releasing military members. The Ombudsman recommends 3 things, and I quote from his testimony before the Veterans Affairs Committee. 1, the Canadian Armed Forces retain medically releasing members until all benefits and services, including those from Veterans Affairs, have been finalized and put in place prior to releases. 2, that one point of contact be established, if you will, a concierge service for all medically releasing members to assist in their transition. And 3, that the Canadian Armed Forces develop a tool that is capable of providing members with information so that they can understand their potential benefit suite prior to release. Mr. Speaker, these are 3 simple initiatives. They're not costly, and they will help the veterans who need it most, those that are wounded and very much need our help and assistance on the road to recovering and to becoming civilians again. My question today is whether the government will actually take concrete steps to help veterans, in particular those who have been wounded during their service. Will the government fulfill its promises? Will the Minister of Veterans Affairs implement the Ombudsman's recommendations?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Veterans Affairs.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'm very pleased to rise today to answer my colleagues' questions about how we are addressing the needs of Canada's veterans, and I appreciate her concern for veterans. Because we do owe a huge debt of gratitude to the brave men and women who have served Canada so well in times of war, in times of conflict and peace. And the debt is even greater when a member of the Canadian Armed Forces becomes disabled as a result of doing his or her job. There is no doubt we can always do better for them and their families, and we shall. To be clear, in addition to implementing new benefits for veterans, Veterans Affairs processed over 37,000 claims last year. The 11,500 claims referenced in the report are in the process of being addressed. Some of them have actually come in very recently. In the last year, we've seen a 22% increase in the number of new applications for disability benefits. And Mr. Speaker, this is a good thing. It means that our efforts to reach out to veterans and encourage them to ask for the benefits that they so rightfully deserve, it's working. Currently, of those applications in the queue, there are a few, 3,500, that are taking longer than we would like. We're taking action to resolve this. So far, we've hired 250 new frontline staff to provide service to our veterans, and we're working on adding 150 more to improve our service levels and thus reducing wait times. We're also streamlining both the process to apply for disability benefits and the decision-making process where Canadian Forces members and veterans are approved faster for certain common conditions. In the past year, we processed 27% more disability claims than in the previous year. We have many initiatives underway to improve the services veterans and their families receive, and we're going to make them even more veteran-centric. We are conducting a review of the financial benefits offered to veterans to determine how best to meet their needs and the needs of their families and ensure they have access to the right programs and services at the right time. We'll continue to work with the Department of National Defence to address closing the seam, to address the transition period, because that is something we see as absolutely critical to their future. So, Mr. Speaker, in end, we're working hard already to make sure that veterans and their families get the benefits they need when they need them. There is a lot of work to do. We've done a lot of work already, but we're going to just keep going until we get it done, Mr. Speaker. Thank you.
The honourable member for London Fanshawe.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I want my colleagues to know that veterans are tired of hearing empty promises. They want action now. 400 new workers are not enough because so many of those service workers were either dismissed or left VAC. Our veterans deserve respect and dignity. Sadly, many injured veterans receive neither. They feel tossed out of their career and left without an identity. They are then abandoned by the government that asked them to serve in the first place. We can and must do better for the men and women who put their lives on the line and for their families who have sacrificed so much. By implementing the Ombudsman's recommendations, the government can take an important first step in repairing the damage done through years of neglect to our veterans. Will the government commit now to implementing the Ombudsman's recommendations and ensuring that our injured veterans and their families have a smooth transition to civilian life?
Parliamentary Secretary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This issue does need to be addressed, but it's not just Veterans Affairs can't work on its own to address it. We need to work with National Defence to close that seam, to create that seamless transition to civilian life. And there is lots of improvements that need to be made to benefits, to pensions, to services, and we need to make sure that they're already all lined up, easing that transition into civilian life that will prevent the kind of challenges that we're seeing today in the future. We're going to continue to make things better for all veterans and their families, ensuring that they get the right benefits in a timely manner when they are needed. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.